Hey, hi! Welcome to Someone Else's Movie, the original podcast where an actor, writer, director, or nebulous industry figure gives a little love to a movie they didn't make. I'm Norm Wilner, senior film writer for Now Magazine, and this is the other thing I do. My guest this week is Mark Tonderai, a writer and director whose credits include the feature films Hush and The House at the End of the Street, and episodes of Doctor Who, Castle Rock, 12 Monkeys, Gotham, and Black Lightning, among others. His latest feature, Spell, stars Omari Hardwick as a big city lawyer who finds himself trapped in a remote cabin after a plane crash, and that's not his biggest problem. It's available on demand this Friday, October 30th from Paramount Pictures. Mark picked The Straight Story, the most radical film of David Lynch's career. I mean, Disney released it, with a G rating. It's the true story of Alvin Straight, who in 1994 drove 240 miles from Iowa to Wisconsin to visit his ailing brother, and he did it on a riding mower. Richard Farnsworth plays Alvin in an Oscar-nominated performance, and Lynch builds a beautiful world around him, filling the screen with all the kindness and optimism that never seems to make it into his other films. If you've seen it, I don't need to describe it to you. And if you haven't seen it, you should. This is Someone Else's Movie.
This is I don't mean to sound contentious, but so when I got this, I call it an assignment.
Sure.
A film that I love that I wish I'd made. And I started to go through list of them. I started to write a whole lot of lists, right? Charlie Varick, The Wild Bunch, Thunderbolt Lightfoot, Bridge Over River Kwai, Platoon, Black Sunday, Some Like It Hot, Wild Bunch, North by Northwest, Double Indemnity, All About Eve, Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, Arlington Road, Kramer vs. Kramer, The Dumb Waiter, The Magnificent Man, and The Flying Machines. And then as I wrote the list, I suddenly had a problem with the list. It was a big problem. Obviously, I'm a person of color. And, all my life has been refracted through that prism. Be it my choice or not. And so being black is who I am, and it's impacted my life in the same way as, say, being a woman might be. And it's what I lead with, right? It's what other people lead with me. But none of those films feature black people, right? None of those.
Yeah, I noticed.
But they're all films that I love, and they're all films that I wish I had made, and I love them. And so I had to really put down the pen, and I thought about this, and I was like, the problem with modern film, has been the absence of people like me on screen, right? It's an imbalance that's slowly been readdressed. But as a child, I didn't see me on screen, right? I didn't see stories about people like me on screen until I saw, Donna Summer in The Last Dance or Diana Ross in The Wiz. So in good conscience, how could I make a list of films that ignored my story? And how could I choose films that, once I place them in the historical context, bumps against the civil rights movement of the black experience? I mean, take, for example, The Magnificent Man and Their Flying Machines. It was one of the first films my father took me to see, and I loved it, right? It was made in 1965. The Fair Housing Act only came into effect in 1968. Do you see my point?
Yeah.
So for me, cinematic art was exclusive for white people. So how can I choose a list? How can I choose a film, right, without looking like I advocate this exclusivity? Because choice has been denied me and it's limited. So why choose, right? So that's the dilemma I had when I found out that I was going to be talking to you. And in a strange way, there's an argument to be made that I don't have to pick a film, right? The discussion starts now, right?
Sure.
Do you know what I mean? And so I was like, oh, okay, right, now I really have to think about this. So you've given me a lot of food for thought with this little assignment. So I thought, okay, then what I'll do is I'll feature films of people of color. So I did. The Grand Voyage, and Prophet, The Harder They Come, Boys in the Hood, Glory, Pulp Fiction, the Defiant Ones, and all of those sorts of films. But that didn't feel right either, right? Because I was ignoring films that maybe didn't fit my criteria, but I couldn't deny them because they're a part of the canvas of my life, right? So I can't deny the videos of them in their flying machine because, like it or not, it's a part of my life and it's a part of kind of who I am. So it felt to me like I was almost practicing a reverse form of bias. So then I came to this answer, and this is what I'm going with. I had to put aside that sort of problem with the film and look at films that I wish I had made because they transcend everything. They're all about emotion, right? Because no matter who we are, right, black, white, green, pink, purple, blue, whatever, we all feel the same things. The commonality amongst us is emotion, with love being the most powerful one. Yeah. So it doesn't matter what culture we are or where we're from, even, we all feel. And so that's what I started to focus on. I started to focus on movies that moved me because they were universal. And that's why I chose Lynch's The Straight Story.
It's odd because when you picked it, when I was told that you picked it, I thought, oh, that's that's a really white movie. And it is. And having just seen your film Spell, which is a really black movie. I mean, it's about a specific type of black experience, expanded and exaggerated into the supernatural, into a horror film, which it resonates in the same way that there are elements of Get Out in there, where a simple social disparity is exaggerated into horror because the awkwardness is rooted in something that's malevolent. And
Right.
Spell is sort of there's a class argument playing out in that film in as much right as anything else. And I'm not going to get into the specifics and spoil it for people, but the Straight Story is, the title's a pun, but it's also a genuine representation of that story. It is exactly what it appears to be. There's no metaphor,
Right.
there's no context. It's simply a straight line of one thing to the next.
Yeah.
And it is absolutely David Lynch embracing his very, very middle American heritage. He was his biography famously for Mulholland Drive. I did the press junket for that. And this is in the days of printed press packets where you would get, 40, 50 typewritten pages of the star bios and everything in the plot. And the only information for David Lynch was simply a blank. The page was otherwise blank, but it had his name, and centered in it in the middle in type was Eagle Scout, Missoula, Montana. And it's a joke, but it's also not a joke, right? Because he really does present himself. The more rewatching the film this week, just to get ready for this, I realized Richard Farnsworth is playing the David Lynch that we all know now from the public appearances, and like that pronunciation and that diction, that the way he carries himself and the way he hits certain vowels and harder sounds. That's the guy I see telling me not to watch movies on an iPhone.
Yeah. It's staggering, and I've got to be clear, I mean, literally the next line I write here is, let's be clear, this story's got only one black person in it, and it's the weatherman on the TV at the 1 hour 37 mark, right? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it fits the ignoring of my cultural viewpoint that I despise totally. But like I said, it's one of the cornerstones in my filmmaking canvas, right? Do you know what I mean? So I can't, I'm half white, and I'm half black, right? So for me, that dichotomy between these two worlds is a place that I live very, very, very. I embrace living there. So for me to deny it is just as bad as to not deny it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so, for me, like I said, I could have chosen so many different films, and every week I could probably choose. If you asked me the same question, I would choose a different film just based on where I am emotionally in that week. But for me, this film and its themes, in particular, really, really resonate for me. And I'm a big, big theme guy. It's all about theme, what the film is trying to say. And like I said, I can't excuse its whitewashing of my culture. But I can say this, that, it doesn't matter who you are, you're going to be moved by this film, and, in some ways, because I think, well, let me first tell, in case people don't know what the film's about, it's about a 73-year-old guy called Alvin Strait who learns that his brother Lyle has had a stroke, and he can't drive, so he goes from Iowa to Mount Zion on a lawnmower, and that's really what the film's about. It's that simple, but really it's about a man who wants to see his brother again so they can look at the stars together, And even when you put it in that context, it's something special, and it hinges on the fact that it never ever sways in sentimentality, and it could easily have done. It never does, and I can't quite figure out why that is, but I think I've got a suspicion. But I think it hinges around those 2 points that you just alluded to: David Lynch and Richard Farnsworth. Right? I think Lynch's choices and the performance, which is one of the best performances I've seen. Is in fact everybody's performances, even the day players.
Yeah.
Harry Dean Stanton has, I think, 8 words. Evan McGill is in it. James Cowder's in it. The Farley brothers are in it. And of course, the great Wiley Harker's in it, right? Who I think steals the movie in just one scene, right? So you've got these incredible sort of performances that kind of linchpin this film together. And then and like I said, why did I choose it this week? I operate camera, and so I operate camera, and I think the reason I operate camera is because you can really feel the actor's performance because you're dancing with them and you're attuned to their performance. So it's happening in real time through the eyes, through the eyepiece, not through a monitor 20 meters away, right? You can see their choices because, You're with them at inception of those choices, right? You're there at the birth of them, right? And this is, for me, is the key. For me, performance is all what it's about to me. You know, it's all about performance. And so when I look at that performance, and let's talk about Richard Farnsworth, right?
Yeah.
You know, for me, I look at that character, and as a writer, I write about characters that are broken. And there's a character that is broken quite literally. I mean, that first shot, which is very kind of almost a sort of a simile of the shot in Blue Velvet. Instead of, you know, coming into the lawn and finding a finger, we come down and we see a woman sunbathing, and then the camera cranes forward, and then it goes to a window, and then we just hear a body fall, you know? Yeah. And then that's how we meet Alvin for the first time, right? And, you know, and he's breaking down. He's breaking down. He's not just a broken man, he's breaking down. You know, he needs a hip replacement. He's as stubborn as a mule and doesn't want one. And then we meet his daughter, Rosie, you know, played by Sissy Spacek. And she, and again, you know, she plays a character that for me sees and interprets the world differently to you and me. And I refuse to lose the word intellectual disability, because I just don't see people like that. You know, for me, people that interact with the world differently because they were born that way, they perceive the world in a beauty and a purity and a frequency that you and I can never see. And that's special to me, right? So that's not a disability. And that's the word that I prefer to use, special. And that's what Rosie is. And you realize that she's this heart that Alvin sort of rotates around. And you know, and like I said, Lynch never patronizes her, and it never gets sentimental, and it could easily have done both, you know. And of course, in today's culture now, Rosie would be played by someone who was special. They wouldn't have gotten an able-bodied actor to play her. But everything about her, you know, the backstory that she has, and you know, there's no denying that honesty and humility and respect they sort of afford that character, you know. But back to Farnsworth, this kind of face that's kind of etched with age lines that kind of like look like the dried up riverbeds. You know, it's his eyes. They have this broken, sad quality, like they're holding back so much pain. Because that's the point. It's so much more painful seeing someone trying not to cry than seeing someone weeping.
Yeah.
And every scene he's in, it's so measured. And great acting is all about listening for me and using the gaps between the words. Sometimes not using words at all. And you could watch this movie with the sound off and you'd understand what was going on, you know? And for me, you know, there's a wonderful scene where he talks about how he was a sniper, which is probably the most dishonorable job really to have in the military, you know, because it always feels like a sitting duck kind of job. And, you know, he tells a story about how he shot a target and turned out to be one of his own men, but he never told anybody. And you can see that secret is just consumed him. And it's a burden that he carries every day. And it's one of the saddest scenes I've ever seen on celluloid. But for me, I look at a scene like that and I look at a characterization beat like that and I go, okay, sense of regret over a past sin and not being able to feel absolution or even think you deserve absolution. Jesus, how many of us feel that way? Do you know what I mean? And this is what I mean about the sort of universality of the film. You know, that is such a powerful idea, and such an idea that I personally, you know, as a man who has fucked up hugely, you know, in his life, and maybe will never be able to get some sort of forgiveness for the things that I've done, I really relate to that. You know, it doesn't matter what color I am. You know, it doesn't matter that this is a white story about, you know, an aging cowboy. You know, and when he says the more years I have, the more they have lost. You know, I'm sitting there and I'm just thinking, this is poetry. And this idea that men of war don't talk about war unless they're talking to other men of war is just brilliant. You know, It's just so brilliant. And these two men in that bar who probably never speak, they're strangers, but the way they're talking and the way they're cutting open their heart and sharing their hearts with each other, it's just for me what this is all about. You know, I believe my job every day is to somehow go in there and to try. I get very emotional about this sort of stuff, so if I get emotional, you must excuse me. But I feel very strongly that our job is to go out there, and our job is to capture the truth. That's what my job is to try and capture the truth. And I don't call actors, I call them truth tellers. And that's all my job is. And the truth is like a sun, and we try and touch it. And because we're all trying to touch this orbit of the sun, and we're in this orbit of the sun, something happens on the set where we kind of connect in ways that we didn't have. You make friends on set that you would never make ordinarily, because we're suddenly in this kind of under this veil of truth, and we're all trying to find it. And for me, whenever I see films that feel like the truth, and that they feel so pure like that I just know this doesn't even feel like a performance. Then for me, I'm going, whoa, this is kind of something else now. This is we're in a different territory here, and we're in the hands of a master storyteller. Because that's what these guys are. They're masterful storytellers. And so I'll keep quiet now because I realize I've been talking a lot.
No, it's fine. This is your episode. You can have as much time as you want. It does strike me, the conversation you're describing, the scene in the bar between basically two veterans, one of whom we've been spending the entire film with and another who we'll never see again. It made me wonder this time if this is what happens every time he meets a veteran, if he's constantly unburdening himself and he can never get it out, or if this is the first time he's disclosed it because this is so clearly his last trip. Like he's constantly telling people, I want to do this myself. I have to do this my own way. He's always politely refusing offers of help, which is really, I think, unique in Lynch's filmography, that there is that much compassion and empathy in every direction. This is a film, as you say, it's about love. It's about everyone being willing to stop whatever they're doing and just listen to someone else's story over and over and over again. And Alvin is our focal character. He hears a lot of stories, but he's always revealing something about himself when he does. And the sense throughout that, this is a road movie and the journey is the destination and all of that stuff. Like all of the usual cliches can apply, but there's just something about the way that Lynch executes them so wholeheartedly. There's no naivete. There's no affectation, and nobody saw this coming. This is 3 years after Lost Highway.
That's what I mean.
Showed up with this film and told a story about people.
No one, and that's, for me, what you've just said there is, and let's just talk about that for a sec. Lynch's direction, the film is slow, right? But that's not a criticism for me, right?
No.
I like that. Like Alvin, it kind of mimics his pace, like you just said, 2 years actually. I think it was 2 or 3. He just made Lost Highway, but it does follow a very classic sort of quest story. I mean, it's Jason and the Argonauts, right? It's a character going on a journey and he meets different people, and you can sort of label them out. But all these people that he meets and all the obstacles he meets extrapolate a different theme, right? So for me, you look at those themes: fragility of age, the inevitability of endings, right? The power of love and belief, and the death of the modern American cowboy. Yep. The burden of guilt. And he has to take the journey, and he has to rescind all help, because the journey involves suffering, and he must suffer if he wants absolution, right? Do you know what I mean? And so, in its own ways, it's almost incredibly Catholic. It's very sort of it's very much like that. But for me, it never stops being a Lynch film, right? The sparkles of humor. The woman at the beginning, who says, what's the number for 911? It's just a great moment, and there's a lovely moment in the film where we're on the lawnmower and we sort of pan up and we pan up off the white lines, and we go into the sky and we hold and it's usually a transition, and we come down again and the lawnmowers move like 20 feet, right? It's just a brilliant, and then you tie that with Angelo Badalamenti's score, right? Which again never becomes secrecy. It never becomes sacrosanct. It's always a beautiful score, but it never becomes mopey or like some of these scores do. But,
it's very patient, isn't it? It just sort of it follows the pace of the lawnmower. It just glides alongside. Yeah,
and here's my thing. Let me just make this last point, but about the Lynchians in it, and it's of course the deer woman. The deer woman hits the deer, and then Alvin cooks it, and when he looks up, he's surrounded by loads of deers, right? And they're all staring at him. I mean, that's such a Lynchian moment, right? You know what I mean? This kind of surreal moment of these deers, right? And he's kind of eating this thing. It's great, the small things are big things, right? And the film marinates, and I feel Alvin as his bones creak when he gets off the lawnmower to get his hat, And that busted gear moment where the lawnmower must be going about 30 miles per hour, it feels like Judah Ben-Hur trying to control his chariots. It's that kind of energetic. And so for me, I look at this film, and when I think about Lynch, and when I think about, me, and when I think about what I do is when you direct, you're under siege, right? All the time. And you're under siege. The person that you're under siege the most by is yourself, right? You know, that's the person you understand the most by. You know, have I made the right choice? Have I done this? Have I done this? Blah, blah. And you beat yourself up hugely. And, you know, when you meet a director that like this, who's doing these films and is known for making sort of certain films, who suddenly goes, you know what, here's a story I want to fucking tell, right? And here's why I want to tell it. You know, I admire that so much, right? Because so many directors are full of shit. They get this opportunity and, you know, they'll go and make a piece of shit, right? You know, instead of going, okay, I've got this power now, I can go and make those difficult films. That's why I really respect Leonardo DiCaprio. A lot of those films wouldn't get made if it wasn't for him, you know? It's like storytellers like that, I really respect, you know? They don't sort of go off and go and make a fucking Cats or some shit. Do you know what I mean? It's like, you know, they go out there and they find these really difficult stories that no one else will make, and they make them, you know? George Clooney does it, you know? Yeah. And so for me, when I look at Lynch and I look at, you know, all the decisions that he made in this film at the time that he made them and the point in his career that he made them, you know, I look at it and I just go, and I go, Christ, would I have made those decisions? I don't know if I would. It's like me now after making Spell and someone saying to me, hey, we've got a dog movie for you. Do you want to make it? Do you know what I mean? It's literally as kind of like, it's literally as left turn as that. Do you know what I mean? And me going, yeah, you know, like I really admire George Miller, you know. I mean, George Miller does it, right? George Miller fucking made Babe, and then he goes and makes, you know, Happy Feet, and then he goes and makes arguably a reboot of Mad Max that's probably better than his original one. You know, it's like, you know, I mean, you're sort of going, you know, this, you know, I just sort of sit there and I'm just kind of in awe at these people's strength, you know, because it's so hard to do that. The rest of the world is telling you, hey, you're good at this. That's what you got to do. You got to do this next. You know, these guys are going, you know what? Thanks a lot, but you know what? This is the story that I really want to tell, and it's a really important story because of this. And so, you know, really, if I'm being honest with you, you know, my mentor is one of my mentors anyway. He's a playwright called Trevor Griffith, and he taught me one thing. He taught me lots of things. One of the things he taught me, he says, as an artist, you should always go places that you're scared of going, and that's what Lynch did. And you know, for me, that's why I kind of admire it. Well, I wish I'd made it. I would have made it with an all-black cast, though.
Yeah, in America, I don't know that a black man on a riding mower would make it to his destination.
No, he would have been shot
in that world. Right. Yeah, or he'd just be constantly getting pulled over, if nothing else. Yeah. It's a completely different film with a black cast.
Yeah.
But this does actually bring up, in relation to your own development as a filmmaker, when did you first see it? Did you see it in '99? Had you already made movies when you caught up?
No,
to it?
I saw it soon after. I saw it. I didn't see it when it came out in theaters. I saw it round about then, 1999, and I know I saw it in sort of kind of I think Pulp Fiction came out then at the same time, and there was all these kind of like very, I call them hard cut films, you know, like Amores Perez and all this sort of stuff that I was really kind of watching, you know, and City of God, and it was all of that kind of era, you know. I was really kind of into those sorts of films, and La Haine and stuff like that. And I was really kind of eating up a lot of those sorts of films, and they were really kind of like keying into my anger, you know, how I felt, you know, at the world, which is an anger that I've never really lost. But this film, when it came out, I remember being so disarmed by it because it was Lynch, right? And this was a guy that, you know, like I said, you know, I know all these fucking films, right? And, you know, he's making this, you know, and it just, you know, like I said, I just remember going, Jesus, is this guy crazy or is he insane? And then when you look at it and you go, Jesus, this is kind of one of those films that's really sort of been put together really well, you know? Wow, you know? I'd love to know what you know, I read an article online when I was researching this, and someone was talking about how they love David Lynch, and they didn't mention this film. And I thought, you're not really a David Lynch fan if you don't mention this film, right? Do you know what I mean? Yeah. Because you go for the obvious ones, Eraserhead, blah, 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 Twin Peaks, blah, blah. You go for the obvious ones, but, you know, this is probably his most naturalistic and probably personal film that, you know, that he's made, right? You know what I mean? You know?
I think so. I mean, there's this and The Elephant Man. Those are the two true stories, right?
Yeah.
And The Elephant Man is incredibly impressionistic and surreal and you know, heaving with black and white sweat and ducts and noise and steam, because that's the world he wants to show us, the Victorian, you know, just right in the middle of the Industrial Revolution, and everything's changing, and there's this freak in the center of it all, the way the characters perceive him. And here, there is no freak, but the centerpiece of the film is still an oddity, right? That Alvin Straight is as strange to the people who meet him as John Merrick was to the people who met him. Right. And I thought, like, that's the commonality for me into the film for Lynch is he has to see someone in the center as incomprehensible. And so we have to spend the whole movie comprehending that person. And I think that's the device of the script, of the slow revelations, of the trickle of information that comes out of Alvin, that by the time he gets where he's going, and, it's not a sure thing that he'll make it. He turns back almost immediately in the first run, which I think is such a great little touch. By the time he gets there, we know who he is inside and out. And it's so heartbreaking to watch nothing happen. It's not in a bad way. It's that he simply gets there and they sit down and that's it. What else is there?
That's it. And he just says, you came in that.
Yeah.
And all the way you wrote in
such
that.
A great little moment.
And that's it. And you see, and again, in Harry Dean Stanton's eyes, you just see it all. You just see it all, right? It's just a close-up of his face and his eyes. And, and that's it. And then he's sort of like, and then Farnsworth just kind of says, yeah. And again, he looks almost embarrassed. He doesn't look proud or like, yeah, I came to see you in that. It's like he looks almost ashamed, It's just one of those things. And like I said, I really, honestly, when I found out that I was doing this, I really, really had to think about it. Like I said, I told you at the beginning, there's a part of me that didn't want to choose a film because, there's a part of me that goes, right now, let's talk about it now, right? The discussion starts now. Yeah. Because this has got nothing to do with me in terms of being blackness, but it's got, because it's got something more powerful than that. It's got something to do with me as a human being. Yeah, and that's absolutely. Why it's powerful. That's why it's powerful.
It's what Ebert said. I always come back to this at least once every 3 or 4 weeks. It's the empathy machine, that if you can create a work that puts you in someone else's world or makes you feel someone else's feelings, there's no other art form that can do it in the same way as film. And here, I think it's the pacing, it's the structure, it's all the things that should be familiar and then just aren't a little bit. He just puts it off by 5 or 10 degrees to a place where we really don't know what's going to happen next, even though there's nowhere else this story can go. It's remarkable. And and Farnsworth, who, in Canada, the guy's a legend because he starred in The Grey Fox, which is one of the most successful Canadian films ever made in, I think, 1982. He played a train robber, another true story, actually. And so even though he's not Canadian, he's world famous in Canada because he made the movie here when no one else was making movies here. And so that was celebrated in a different way here. But I remember going and seeing it and thinking, oh, yeah, he was a former stuntman. He was before he was an actor, and then he somehow eased into this incredible screen presence that he has. And you see him, and in the first 3 minutes, he's vulnerable, and he stays on the floor for that entire scene. Yeah. And there's no vanity to the character or to Farnsworth. And I think that's the key, that he is so vulnerable and so human and broken before the movie even starts, right? That we have to be on his side.
Right. There's no artifice there. It's like, I really truly believe that he slept in the back of that fan. You know what I mean? It's like it's at the back of that lawnmower. There's even the makeup. It doesn't feel like he's even got makeup on. It just feels like, it feels like the last rodeo, and I don't care anymore. I don't care about this world, the trappings of this world. All I know is that I need to do the right thing. I've got to do the right thing. And it's a really, it's really, one of the things that I fight a lot about in the field that I'm in at the moment is, at the moment they're trying to hire us. They'll always try and hire an ethnic choice, right? You know what I mean? And I'm sort of like, that's great that you're doing that. But you know what? Why aren't you hiring us to be your pilot directors? Do you know what I mean? You're still hiring white guys to do pilots, but you know what I mean? And so and at the same, and also, I get offered black stuff, and I sort of go, look, I'm a filmmaker, right? Do you know what I mean? I should be able to do everything. I should be able to do anything I want, right? If I want to tell a story about an alien, I should be able to tell a story about an alien. I shouldn't just be having to tell a story about black people. So for me, it's a really interesting sort of like place to be, where I'm sort of at one hand, demanding sort of like, demanding that I could be seen as a filmmaker, but at the same time saying, well, the history of film is been skewed against me. Do you know what I mean? So, how do I marry those two things together? And I don't quite know what I'm saying, but I'm sort of saying, it's for me, it's almost a cliche if I'd come in here with Boys in the Hood, right? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I get that.
You know what I mean?
But this is, to your point, this is where you get to start to correct the balance, right? You can
Mm.
create the opportunities. You can make a movie like Spell where it's entirely. Am I remembering correctly? There's one white character early on in the film.
There's one white character, and again, I could talk to you about each scene. And the one white character is a lawyer, and that scene is a very, very important scene because it sets up Mark's ambivalence towards other black people, right? Which is kind of what happens a lot, I think, with successful black males. They start to look at themselves above sort of other black people. So that's the first thing it does. The second thing it does, it establishes his love of money and how money is his god. And the third thing it does is for me, establish the place that white corporate America and the view that white corporate America has about black men. So his boss, or the guy who's hiring him, uses the word gladiator, and it's a very specific term that I chose because that's what they do. When I watch the Super Bowl and I see a team of mainly black athletes win the Super Bowl and they give the cup to the chairman first, I think, well, that's plantation. And then the chairman gives it to his kids, and then they give it to the players. I sit and I go, "Are you fucking kidding me?" Right? So for me, white America has no problem using us as blunt force trauma instruments. So for me, that scene is really, really important. And Mark has no problem taking their money. Right? It's all about the money. He says, "Ka-ching, ching." Right? Do you know what I mean? So that's his argument, and that's his belief at the beginning of the film. That's what he feels, and that's the dramatic argument we're setting up at the beginning of the film.
Yeah,
this guy in this world, what he believes. So yeah, there is one white guy in it, and actually, if I'm honest with you, he's probably the most villainous out of all of them, right? Really, do you know what I mean? It's like, he's only in one scene, but he's the one that I think is the real true fucking villain here. But yeah, but everybody else in it is black,
Yeah. Well, and I think having one white character rather than none is actually more of a statement because you are forcing the lens onto the black cast. Like we're much more aware of that disparity because there is a single white presence, even if he's the villain or he's never seen again. But that's just enough to show us what kind of world this film is going to show us.
Yeah. That's right. And so for me, again, it was like, okay, so I set up this world, I set up this character. And now I'm going to set up a counterpoint to that world and to that character, but I don't want it to be a mustache twirling villain, right? And at the same time, I don't want to be disrespectful to this world because I'm from Africa, and my mum believed before she passed away. She believed in juju, so we have things called nangas, which are witch doctors. So this world, it's not the same as hoodoo, but it's the same belief system. So for me, stepping into this world and knowing that people believe in this was quite important to me. And so in a strange way, I wanted to set up this dichotomy that actually what she believes in, this is the central villain, naturalism. She's anti-social media. I'm not. I don't have Twitter, fucking Facebook. I don't mean that shit. She's anti all those things. She's about community. She's about natural products. She's not about money. She's about all these sorts of things. And then to counter that, you've got a guy who's the complete opposite of that. You know what I mean? So you sort of, a lot of the time, you're questioning. I won't say the line because people, your listeners and your viewers and your audience are going to hopefully see the film. But there's that lovely line about our former president. I think you know the line that I mean. And that was a really important line to me. Because at that point you suddenly realize, you know what I mean? You suddenly go, oh, I understand now the motivation now of this character. I don't agree with their choices. That's very important. But I understand where they're coming from. I understand their motivation. I understand who she is. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I didn't want to make a film that was, the urban guy is the smart guy, and he's cultured and this and this and this, and the people from the country are stupid. You know what I mean? And that's why the mother says that line about actually the N-word isn't as bad as what you're saying or what you're thinking about these people. You know what I mean? So I felt that was important because we do, in the black community, we do have issues of colorization, and we do have issues of kind of like uptown and downtown and house and fields and all these different sort of things that we have, that are all there.
Yeah. And I mean, it's sort of, I'm trying to figure out if there's a link into the straight story through, because the final question on the podcast is always, is there something of this film that you've used in your own work? And I think you've just hit it, which is the sense of not misinterpreting, but seeing someone and thinking you know who they are and really the whole point of the Straight Story, and quite a bit of Spell is about not realizing who
Right.
people are and the importance of actually looking closer.
Right. Looking closer, and also sort of like, putting yourself in their shoes, right? Which is probably, it's the line from Atticus Finch, isn't it? It's like, it's a really important thing to do. And of course, the problem that our character has is that to put himself in her shoes means believing. To believe means he can defeat the monster, but once you've entered that world, once you've touched darkness, how much does it leave on you? And that's kind of what the decision that he has to sort of make, and that keys in a lot into kind of like, there's a book that's a big part of the research of this called Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome, right? And talking about the rage that it's kind of prevalent in sort of black males or us as a culture, I'm trying not to generalize here, but I'm just sort of basing it on my experience and my family and my people that I know. And this rage that we feel, I'm not talking about going out there and sort of, smashing people's heads in. I'm just talking about that inside we're angry, right? We're angry. We're sort of like, whatever, for whatever reason it is. And I really wanted to sort of articulate that. And this idea that in a strange way, that anger has kept us alive, or that anger actually is our sort of defense mechanism, and he realizes that at the beginning. He's a guy that's like saying to his son, don't let them see you fighting, kid, because that's what they expect from us, right? You know what I mean? Which is kind of what we think. And at the end, he has to embrace that rage if he's going to get out of it, And so, it's a really, one of the things that I'm terrified about with this film, because we live in a world like this now, of where people don't want to think anymore. They want to be spoon-fed, And I think we're the blame for that. I think the film industry is to blame for that by sort of like by sort of assuming that people are stupid and dumbing everything down. And what I'm so nervous about this film is that people are going to dismiss it as this kind of like, schlocky kind of like horror film, without sort of realizing that, we've tried to construct it with all of this kind of like thematic kind of like, pulp beneath it. You know what I mean?
Sure.
That I don't expect people to go, oh, it's about this, and I can give them an examination on it. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying that it is more than just a guy, in a bed and an old woman, right? It's so much more than that. If you want to look at it, and if you want to see it that way, from even the theme tune at the end, it's like the colors. I mean, Jesus Christ, I could give you a fucking lecture on the colors. I could give you a lecture on where I put the windows in that room. I give you a lecture on all the things in that room. You know what I mean? We've spent so long thinking about it and trying to make sure that everything in the frame supported the narrative and everything supported the theme. And at the same time, saying all of that, it's very important that people are entertained by it, right? Or else I'm not doing my job. So anyway, that's pretty much what I've been trying to do.
No, that's why I love horror movies. You can build any kind of metaphor you want, as long as the structure supports it. You can get away with almost anything.
Yeah. The real trick with this was making sure that the audience understood the rules, whatever, and there's a very simple line in there. Whatever happens to Boogity happens to you. Do you know what I mean? And that's kind of, because in a strange way, it's actually a genre that hasn't really been done before, really. Do you know what I mean? Really, when you really think about it, I think you've had The Skeleton Key, which wasn't very good, but you haven't really had films on hoodoo. You've had voodoo films, right? But this is different. And you've never really had hoodoo films like this before.
Yeah,
and so
they always depend on white outsiders too, which this film does not do.
Right.
And the Serpent and the Rainbow, that kind of thing, where investigating the mythology shows you what's really going on.
Right. And so it was, and we gave nods to Angel Heart, and in the film, the gas station is named after the bookshop in Angel Heart, and I gave those nods, and and the office that he works in as a lawyer is called Sheldon and Woods. So I gave a nod to Paul Sheldon from Misery. So I did all of that in the film because these are films that obviously I took nods from. But yeah, it was getting those rules of engagement out to the audience, and making sure they understood that, and then making sure that at the same time as that, we're dealing with a character that's kind of been abused by his father, and he's coming home, and it's the one place he doesn't want to be because all he's done his whole life is run, and getting that in there, and then getting this whole turn that he has to start to believe for this to work, and that working the increments on that. And when that actually moment happens, you know what I mean? And so when he suddenly realizes it's the only way, sometimes to defeat the monster, you have to become the monster. it was really, really difficult in 90 minutes. Really difficult. Really difficult. But I truly had at Paramount in my boss, a guy called Wick Godfrey, and my other boss, a woman called Ashley Brooks, probably, in my mind, just brilliant enablers, I mean, they literally said to me, what's the film that you want to make? What do you want to say? And they just said, that's what you need to always remember. And that's literally what we did. I mean, some of that footage we shot, on iPhones and stuff, because I really wanted to just plug in all these things, So I'm very happy that as a I'm never happy, if I'm honest with you, but I'm as close to kind of like satisfied as I can be, because a lot of the film looks like how I imagined it,
Yeah, I'm really glad. I think it's definitely what was I going? I was bespoke. There's a texture to it that I really responded to. It just feels, it's a world I've never seen, and it feels authentic. I believe that it's like that's what it would look like.
Yeah.
I mean, there are no John Deere riding mowers in it, but other than that, I think you could make the case.
Yeah. No, it's I've done a lot of TV for a number of years, and to do a film again. The last one was 10 years ago. And I made it on film. I made it on 35. So I actually made a film before film died. So I was happy about that. But 10 years between films, and so there was a lot that I knew that I wanted to do, you know what I mean? And, I went in and pitched the film. I sort of cut together a whole lot of contemporary horror films. And I sort of said, look, if I'm honest with you, one person could have directed all of those, right? They're all lit the same, and lighting is a big, big thing for me. You know what I mean? It's like, we live in this world, hard lighting. I know. I did Gotham, and that's how we lit. Right. I know how people light, and I wanted to do something a bit more subtle that used practicals and used natural light a bit more. So it was more about sort of lighting the space than it is about lighting the actor. And I knew that I wanted to use flares a lot more, because I just like them. And I call it life through dirty windows. That's what I call the style that I've been trying to find for the last 17 years of my life. And so we managed to do it. And I managed to find these little pockets where we did it, like where she's making the booger tea and hanging the clothesline up, Mm-hmm. I shot pretty much all of that, apart from the crane stuff, obviously. And I'm really happy with it, because, it was all about using the focal point, where the eye goes, for the viewer, and where I want the eye to be, So there's a lot of things, like technically, that I'm really happy about the film and how it worked, and the hybrid camera work that I used, where in one scene I might use a crane, and I use handheld, and I use a dolly, and then I would use, a macro, and that's really me, which is, and I am hip hop, and so that's kind of where it all comes from, do you know what I mean? Yeah. And that's, that's for me is what I think of the Straight Story. I know you said earlier on it's a very, very white film, and it is a very, very white film, but in its own way, it is a bit like hip hop. It's a magpie, right? It sort of like takes all these different things, right? It takes all these different camera styles and all these different sort of like ideas and things that shouldn't work, and then puts them into this film, and it sort of works, right? You know what I mean? It's like, yeah. It really is. And for me, filmmaking is literally just like hip hop. It's like you take a little bit of this, you take a little bit of that, and you take a little bit of this, and writing a script is like that, for me anyway. It's all about breaking the fourth wall, using smell, using font. Oh, you know what I'll do? I'll use reported speech here. Oh, you know what I'll do? I'll put a picture in here. It's, all you're doing is trying to get someone to buy your script, Right. And for me, it's the same thing with a film. For me, films are all about, about going, you know what? I don't adhere anymore to any of these fucking rules where they go, well, whatever it is, all these old. I just go, no, what? I'm going to do what I think's right for that moment in the film, and I don't give a shit if it breaks the rules. If it feels right, then I'm going to do it, right? You know what I mean? And so, if it's a top angle, for instance, they go, well, the character should feel defenseless. I sort of go, why? Why is that? Who said that? Who said that? Is that your impression? Actually, when the camera's low, I think sometimes characters look weak. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Who's right, who's wrong, right? You know what I mean? It's like,
feels if it works in the moment, yeah.
Right.
My thanks to Mark Tonderai, whose new film Spell is available on demand from Paramount Pictures this Friday, October 30th. Thanks also to Anna Bustamante. She knows what she did. Mark's not on Twitter, but you can find the straight story on DVD from Walt Disney Pictures. Really. And hopefully it'll turn up in the Criterion Collection one of these days, or at least on Disney+. As always, you can find me on Twitter at Norm Wilner and elsewhere on the internet at nowtoronto.com, where I'm hosting a bunch of podcasts as well as writing about film and television. You can find this podcast on Twitter at Semcast, S-E-M-Cast, and on the web at someoneelsesmovie.com. Our theme song is by The Last Year. If you like it, or the show in general, please say so. Leave a review on Apple Podcasts or Google Podcasts or wherever you've been enjoying us. Every little bit helps, it truly does. And check out the other shows on the Frequency Podcast Network. They're good. Stay inside, watch movies, wear a mask if you go out. I'll see you next time.